Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a great evening so far. I'll allow a couple seconds for everyone to join. You'll notice that you're just automatically muted when you join. It's just because there's a lot of people on the call, so we don't want to have any distractions. Um, but this is very much an interactive call in the sense that there will be time for questions at the end, so you'll have time to unmute yourself and you can voice your questions. And if at any point throughout the presentation, you want to ask a question, you can also always drop that in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that and make sure questions are answered. Yeah, so welcome to our parenting series. This is the first one of this month. So we're going to be meeting at this time for 4 Wednesdays throughout the month of October as a space for Montessori parents and families to come and learn about parenting. Um, this is a space for you to learn from Montessori experts and ask questions and hopefully take away some helpful thoughts and strategies when it comes to parenting and ideas as well. As I said, this is very much an interactive session, and I hope that everyone can get their questions answered. So feel free to drop any comments, questions in the chat for those of you who just joined. And this is also being recorded, and the recording will be available tomorrow. So reach out to your Montessori school, or you can also reach out to Hindola. I'll be sharing that with her. All right, we're joined today by Hindola, who's joining us from India. Very early in the morning for her. She just let me know. And she's here to talk about temperament tunes, nurturing harmony in your child's unique melody. I'm sure you hear the word harmony a lot. As a Montessori parent, we try to keep our classrooms very harmonious, and hopefully we can translate that into the home. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Hindola. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat.
Hi everyone, great to be here. Early in the morning for me, but that's a great start to the day. Um, so my name is Hindola, and I primarily work with parents. I take parenting sessions, um, and I also do teacher sessions, but mostly with parents. And I also work with a couple of toy companies here to do early childhood videos for them. So I work a lot in the parenting space. This topic for me is very close to my heart because I feel it's the key to parenting and one of the most important things a parent needs to be aware of, and something that will ease the relationship with their child. So I'll jump right into the topic. So, so firstly, I mean, many people seem to be confused with what temperament is. So, temperament describes how we approach the world, how we respond to the environment and the situations in the world. Um, Let us say you go to an airport and you are told that your flight is delayed. So, how do we react? Each of us has a different way of reacting to that situation, right? Some of us get really worried. There might not be anything on the other end, which is in a tearing hurry, but still we get very anxious about it and maybe go to the next counter and see when the next flight is or why this flight is delayed. Some of us might just think of it as an opportunity to sit back and relax or read a book or catch a nap. So each of us has a different way of reacting to the same situation. And this is based on our temperament. And children are born with a temperament. It's brain based. It's not something that a child chooses, or something that parents create. And this is very important for us to know. And it's just like every child has physical features, like the shape of your nose is different, the color of your eyes, the hair is different. In a similar way, each child's temperament is different. Their style of behavior is different. This is inborn, it is genetic, and it is from the very beginning of life. Mary Sheedy, in her book, talks about newborn babies in a nursery, and she says that you can hear some children cry really loudly, some children are just whimpering, and these children have just born. They've not even absorbed anything from the world yet. but still they have different ways that they cry. And who has taught them this? It is based on their temperament. Even if you see two children from a very young age, their reaction to even things like hunger or wetting their nappy, everything is different and unique to them. And that's what makes them that unique person. Many parents think that the temperament of their child can be molded or corrected. But when we think like that, we're basically trying to rewire the child's brain circuitry with rewards or by disciplining them. But by doing that, we are working against the child's inborn nature, and it usually backfires when you're trying to change the brain circuitry of the child. It's important to know that although the child's temperament cannot be changed, we can change the way the child responds to it, or rather manages it. Um, Parent-child interaction is a transactional process. This means that the way the child behaves influences our parenting, and the way we parent influences the child's behavior. And this constantly keeps transacting, and it has to. That's very important. We cannot be very set in our ways that this is the way to parent, because each child requires a different way of parenting, and that evolves with time. Um, so this I feel is an important thing, temperament and personality, to understand that, because as soon as I talk about temperament being brain-based and being with the child throughout life, many parents tend to think that, oh, if my child is born this way, does it mean that they have to live with it the entire life? So that's why I thought we need to understand temperament and personality. So temperament is the foundation that we are born with, and as we grow, patterns emerge with the way the child interacts with the environment, with the way our parenting is. Layers build on top of temperament, and that becomes the personality of the child. As parents and adults around the child respond to their temperament, they still feel the temperament, but there's a shift in the responses to suit the environment. And that's the personality. So let me give you an example. Let's think of a child who's really shy and does not takes time to interact with someone new. And this child has parents who are maybe a little pushy. And suppose if they have guests at home and they push the child to say, come on, go play with this child or go talk to the guest. And when the child is hiding behind the mother or the father, they express disappointment every time the child does that. And they leave the child in the room with the guests so that the child can interact and they go away. So when they do this, they're really pushing the child to the other extreme. And if this is consistently repeated, the child feels that every time something new happens, the experience is a negative experience. And this builds the child's brain circuitry to think that anything new is something that the child can't handle. So then the child, as they grow into teens or adolescents, then they want to go be away from these kind of situations. They'd rather be in their room, locked up and playing with their Lego or reading a book rather than interacting with people, and that becomes their personality. But if if the same child had parents who understood her or his personality and gave time to interact with new people, they said, "Okay, I understand you don't want to interact with these new guests. You can sit on me and maybe just watch us." And after many interactions, say, "You've seen them. Would you like to go give this toy to them and play with them?" So if they give them the time to interact with people, then the child sees that, oh, if I push myself a little and interact with something new, the experience on the other side is a positive one. And if this continues day after day consistently, every time, then the child is wired to think that I know I'm not comfortable with this situation, but if I do push myself to interact with it, it's a positive one. So they learn how to deal with this situation, and that becomes the personality of the child. So the temperament of both these children is the same, but the personality is hugely different because of the interactions they've had with their environment. So that's what I mean by temperament and personality. So, if a child is born with a temperament of being extremely shy, it doesn't mean that the child will grow up to be socially awkward or extremely shy. It just means that the child might not be happy in a setting where he or she has to be, a salesman who knows everyone. They might be comfortable in roles like, working in a research lab or an accountant or something that fits their niche. So you can't veer a child who's shy to be the life of the party, nor can you pull a child who's exuberant and turn that child into a very bookish and shy person. So the temperament creates boundaries, but it does not dictate the destiny of the child.
Hindola, are we meant to be looking at a presentation? I think you just took it down.
Oh, did I take it down?
Yeah,
Sorry.
you might have to reshare your screen. Sorry.
Okay, okay, no problem.
I can see it. Oh,
Oh, sorry.
I was able to see it.
Oh, okay. So
Oh,
yeah, I was too.
maybe it's just a problem on my end. Thank you.
are you able to see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, okay. So, why is it important to understand temperament? I'll go through a few reasons. Firstly, a child's temperament has a profound impact on how parents view themselves because a lot of importance has been given to environmental factors for a child's behavior, which is true. Environment has a huge impact on it. Um, but we need to remember that a child's inborn temperament is equally important, especially in the early days when the child has not had enough experience in the world. Um, Parents start to feel guilty or that they are not doing enough if the child does not sleep well or the child does not accept new foods easily or so parents need to understand that they are not doing something wrong, and nor is anything wrong with the child. The child's temperament is such. So that's one reason that we need to understand temperament. And when temperament is understood, parents can get a better fit with the child. It's called goodness of fit. So it is the child requires a certain way of parenting, like how we just spoke about the shy child, needs a certain way of parenting. And if we are not parenting that way, there's always a constant tussle between the parent and the child. But if we can change our parenting, then we find the goodness of fit. So, by knowing our child's temperament, we can mold our parenting to fit the child rather than make the child fit our view of a perfect child, which is never going to happen. And when we do this, we usually end up feeling frustrated and also making the child feel like he or she is not adequate and that we're disappointed with them. And another reason is that some traits may appear really difficult or annoy or frustrate the parents or the adults working with children, but we need to realize that these might be assets in the future. Think of a child who does not accept new foods or new experiences easily. That's very challenging when they are newborn or, a year old. But these same traits mean that they are not easily swayed by peers and would not try risky things in future. And that's a trait we always look for in teens, right? And also the next one is that when your temperament and the child's temperament are different, it may feel overwhelming to parent rather than fulfilling sometimes. And this is okay. All parents go through this, but over time, you find a meeting point and find that goodness of fit. Um, so I would now like to, I'll just stop sharing because I want to share a document with you. Just a minute. Maybe in the chat, I'll just put up a document. So, just give me a second. I'm sorry. I think it's time to take a little time. So basically, I just tell you about. So this document is just a Word document about with the different temperament traits. We're talking about 8 temperament traits. I'd like you to download this document or just open this document. And as we talk about the different temperament traits, I'd like you to think about where your child falls on this spectrum and where you fall on this spectrum. Camilla, did it? Sorry.
I'm not seeing it in the chat.
Is
yet.
it? Okay, I think now you'll get it.
Yep,
Did
got
you
it.
get it?
Yep.
Okay. I'll just give you a minute to download it. Are you able to see my? Yeah, okay. Are you able to see the PPT?
Yep.
Okay, so the first, yeah. So the first temperament trait we'll talk about is the activity level. So this is the physical movement that the child shows in daily activities like playing, eating, dressing, sleeping. When the child is hungry, does she roll around or jump around or constantly move? Or does the child just curl up and wait? Say you come back from home, does your child run to you, walk to you slowly, or wait for you to come to him? For a very young child, does the young child wiggle around in the crib, or has the child not even moved an inch even after an hour? Even as toddlers, less active children do not like playing horsey on your knees. They wouldn't attempt to climb up rods or get onto the seesaw. Whereas the active ones like bouncing and jumping and tumbling. And for the really young ones, do they squirm around in this high chair or while changing diapers, or they are considerably still? So you can think about where your child falls and where your activity level is. And are you this really busy person always trying to do different things? And in the document on the right-hand side, I've just given a triangle and a rectangle. You can just copy, paste it, and mark. You can use a triangle for yourself and the rectangle for your child. Mark it on the spectrum. I'll just give you a few seconds there. Okay. Now, how do we deal with the different ends of the spectrum? The children on the lower end of the spectrum would rather not get into an activity themselves. And these children need a certain nudge from the adult because otherwise they're not engaging with anything in the environment. And unless they engage with things in their environment, those neural connections are not formed in their brain. And that knowledge base and the cognition and everything else is not built in the child. Some children are just keen observers. That's different. But these children with a very low activity level are just kind of sitting or walking around and not interacting with anything at all, and they're not really taking much from the environment either. So these kind of children need us. They need a small nudge from the adult to say, hey, these are your blocks, or here's your Play-Doh. Come, let's see what we can do with it. And maybe sit with them and get them started. They may just have starting trouble, but once they get started, they can take it forward themselves. And children on the higher end of the spectrum find it difficult to take even a minute's break. They're always busy, always doing something, and it's always mostly physical activity where they want to run, um, or do something, and their limbs can't stay still. You're always seeing that they're always moving. This is fine in certain settings, but when you look at it from the lens of the child going to school and having to sit in a classroom, or things, settings like that, where they have to listen to someone and absorb things with other senses, then that becomes challenging for these children. And these children need, so how do we cater to their energy levels? These children need more opportunities than just the half an hour or 1 hour of playtime in the park. These children also need their energy directed in a certain way. So the adult needs to be aware of that. Because if their energy is not directed in a certain way, then they're maybe directed to something that's more destructive. So it needs to be channelized properly. Maybe getting the child to do some really hard work in the garden. So they see that the work can be directed in ways that is more constructive. And to see the result of the work rather than just running around is something that will help them channelize their energy as they grow up themselves. The next one we'll talk about is regularity. This is how predictable the child's routine is. In babies, you can see that their bodily functions, like feeling hungry, pooping, feeling sleepy, everything you can predict, you know when they're going to do it. We've heard parents say that their child sleeps at a particular time every day and wakes up exactly at the same time every day. Some children, though, keep changing their rhythm, and it's difficult to anticipate. Their needs also keep changing every day. How predictable is their routine? In older children, we can think of it as how organized they are, how consistent and predictable their social behavior is, or how scheduled they are in completing their tasks. Children can be anywhere on this spectrum. You can take a minute to see, to mark yourself and your child. Okay, so how do we deal with the different ends? The higher end of the spectrum, it's easy to understand what the child needs. So the parents are mostly successful going along with the child's schedule. But as the child grows up in the real world, it's not always possible to maintain the schedule. You might be caught up in traffic or might go to visit someone and your schedule is not kept. And this bothers the child. It, so it helps to inform the child to expect a change in the schedule, and they'll be able to deal with it better. It's good for the child to also experience these off days too, where they're not informed, because this helps them adjust to changes in schedules as they grow up. This does not mean that we don't stick to the schedule at all and constantly trying to give them the experience of not sticking to a schedule. Everything needs to come in small doses that they can deal with without getting too overwhelmed. And when they're in the lower end of the spectrum, in toddlers or school going children, you can insist on the child being with they don't want to eat at the same time when the family, it's dinner time or things like that. So you can insist on the child being with the family at the table during meal times, even if they're not hungry. They can just sit and talk and just be with the family. This can be the start of regular meal times. These children may still need a snack in between or a nap in between, but will learn to go with the schedule of the family. You need to let them experience the natural consequences. Like if they're late to get to the school bus, they'll miss it. So let them experience the natural consequences of not having a schedule so they understand and build it in themselves, um, to know the pros of having a schedule. Um, the next one I'll talk about is initial reaction. So, what is your child's initial reaction to something new or something novel? When he or she sees something new in the park, do they run to it or do they hesitate and wait for a few days to get used to it? Um, Seeing it every day and then decide to go close to it? When you have a new guest at home, do they start talking to them immediately or silently observe them to assess them and then take time to warm up to them? When you make a new dish, is the child waiting to taste it or simply refuse to put it on the plate? We're not talking about major life events here like a new school, but more mundane things. Your child will be somewhere between bold on one end of the spectrum and inhibited on the other end. So most children might fall somewhere in between, and some children will be at the ends also. So you can take a minute to do this. So when the child is bold, parents see this as an asset and there's nothing that the child needs help with. But when the child is really shy, parents find it difficult because it feels like the child is rejecting every new experience. The child's hesitation should not be taken as a rejection. That's a common thing that we as parents always do. It's hesitation and not rejection. The child merely needs time and space to assess this new situation. I would like to talk about my experience because I have a very shy child. When I took my child for to birthday parties or to a play area, he would just not try anything new. He would not leave my side. He took 4 months to adjust to school with me by his side every day. He took 1 year to start playing with other children in his school. Uh, we as parents start wondering what's wrong with our child or what have we done wrong? Why can't our child be like other children and just play and not make a fuss to go to the music class? These children really need time and a little nudge, a small one at a time. I would say, I would say to him, just try the slide, and if you don't like it, you don't need to do it again. I'll stay at the end of at this end of the slide waiting for you, or take one bite of this from my plate, and you can serve it if you like it. So children need a little bit of coaxing, a little bit of nudging. I would say it's important to know what a nudge is and what a push is. They need a nudge, a small one. But as they grow, they'll start to adapt to new things. And though their temperament remains the same, they will nudge themselves to give them that new experience and give that experience a chance. But in the meantime, they need us to accept them, not judge them, and not get frustrated and show our disappointment. That has a huge impact on our child. What we think of our child has a huge impact on what our child thinks of himself or herself. So it's important to accept the child and not judge them. Uh, so The next one is adaptability. This refers to how the child takes to adapt to a change in the routine. Um, if a child is used to sitting at a particular place at a table and eating in a particular plate, and grandma comes in and you need to change the place or the plate, does the child resist uh, or does the child readily accept the change? Maybe the child's evening playmate in the park has stopped coming and they have to play on their own. How long does it take the child to get used to this? Does the child insist on going home or try playing on their own? You promised a holiday somewhere and then it gets cancelled due to work. How readily does your child accept the change in plans, or is there a lot of resistance to this change and only a slow acceptance? So you can take a minute to mark. So how do we deal with this? when there's high adaptability, this is obviously seen as an asset, but we should never take the child's adaptability for granted. We need to acknowledge what the child has done. If he or she has readily accepted the change of plans, acknowledge the child for understanding the situation, because it is very difficult. It's not that an adaptable child is happy with the change in situation. It's just that the temperament has allowed them to adapt to the situation and is making life easy for you. But we should never take that for granted. At least just acknowledge what the child has done. When the adaptability is very low, when the children do not easily adapt, it does not mean that they're not capable of adapting. They need more time, preparation, and support. So, and this is a trait that is very important as they grow up, because life throws many plans astray, and we need to be armed to deal with different situations. So, how do we deal with it? Firstly, reduce the adjustments they need to make and spread it out over time. Say you have a guest coming over and the child needs to sleep in a different room, and also you're planning to change your menu according to the guest's taste. Can we do one thing at a time? Can we change the room on one day, maybe the menu on another day? And also to break it down into steps. You need to go out of station, say, for a couple of days, and you're leaving the child with the grandparents. The week before, the child can spend half a day with the grandparents without you. Another day, the child can spend a night without you, without you in the same room, and then maybe slowly get the child used to staying a couple of days with someone else. So you're just breaking it down into steps and making it smaller steps for the child to adapt to. And lastly, acknowledge the child when he or she has successfully adapted to the change. I know you would have liked to do this, but you made the effort to do something else. Thank you for that. So they also understand what they have done and how it has helped the situation and people around them to have adapted. And the next one we'll talk about is intensity. So this is how much energy your child puts into expressing his or her responses. When the baby is hungry or tired or sleepy, how does the baby react? I mean, do they cry really loudly, or do they whimper? Or even when the child sees the parent come back from work, are they really happy? Are they laughing? Or is it a very mild reaction? So this is how loud their voice is and how much physical energy they put into crying, laughing when they're frustrated, when they're surprised, when they've failed at something, or when someone praises them, when they see a new toy, any of these situations, how loud they are and how much physical energy do they use. An intense child may howl loudly or laugh loudly, and there's high drama, whereas a mild child may just whimper and smile, and there's hardly any outward reaction. So where do you and your child fall in this? So when the drama is high, it's easy to misread a child with intense emotions that the situation needs immediate attention. They might cry out in pain and howl when they fall, but is the hurt bad enough to warrant a similar reaction from us? Or an intense no, I'm never going to wear this t-shirt, I hate it, does not mean that they will not ever use it. Parents need to understand the child's temperament and learn to assess the situation rather than the reaction of the child. When the parents react to the child's responses with the same intensity, then the situation unnecessarily gets amplified. What the child needs, this child especially, is a calm, composed adult who acknowledges what the child is going through, but is also a stable support. And this, over time, helps the child regulate his or her emotions and their reactions. And on the other hand, when the intensity is low, this is easier to deal with. When children express their feelings with no drama, it should it should not be misunderstood as a lack of enthusiasm or a lack of feeling. It's just that they don't react so much. These feelings might be as important to this child as someone who expresses it with a lot of energy. In young children who lack the verbal ability to express, we need to look for other cues like facial expressions and body language. And with older children, it's important to have conversations about how they feel because they don't readily express their feelings and they will need us to get it out of them. The next one is persistence. So, the child's ability to persist in attaining a goal. In young children, we can observe this when they're exploring toys or something in their environment. Say they're trying to open a latch. How long do they persist in accomplishing their task? Do they continue to do it until they get it, or they just try for some time and move on if the first attempt is not successful? How persistent are they? Or how persistent are you too? So, how do we deal with this? When it's high persistence, this is a tremendous trait to possess. This is something we need to encourage and give the child space and time to do what he has set out to do without us being obstacles. Because the child seems so engrossed in the activity and can't even hear you call the child for dinner. In younger children, the time um, may not be so long, the persistence. So it's good to let them complete the task and then tell them to come for dinner or whatever you want them to do. For slightly older children, this starts to it leads to power struggles if the adult is not clued into the child's temperament. Because say they're doing working on a Lego project or something like that, and then you want him to do some other task, but they're so persistent, they want to finish it. So and I have faced this. So it's important to say, I understand this is a long project, but can you plan in such a way that this time we are going to have dinner, we're going to clear the table after this. So plan in such a way. So just to tell them, because otherwise this leads to us always pulling them out of the task. And children who are low on persistence, this may be challenging when the child has to do household chores and they cannot get to the logical end of a task. For these children, it helps to break down the chore into multiple small steps where they can see success and give them smaller steps. So your children needs to keep away his clothes. So you could separate the steps. First step could be, why don't you just separate your t-shirts and pants into different piles? That can be one chore. This is a small one. So the amount of persistence required is less, and they see the logical end of this. And then after some time, you can say, maybe now you can fold this pile, and now you can fold this pile. And then after some time, you can say, why don't you put it back in the cupboard? So you're just breaking it down into steps so they see the logical end. What happens with persistence is that children with low persistence do not see success in anything that they do. So they're not motivated to do it. So if you give them smaller tasks and they see success in it, then slowly they get motivated to allow themselves to persist on a task so that they get the joy out of seeing the logical end of it. And the next one is distractibility. How difficult or easy is it to distract the child's focus from the current activity? Some children can sit in the middle of chaos and be extremely focused on what they're doing, but others can get distracted with a fly passing by. When the distractibility of a child is low, it also means that when your child is hurt, you can easily distract your child from the pain. When you ask the child to not do something and take the child away from it, a child who's not distractible goes back. So if the child is trying to climb up stairs and you carry the child and put the child away in front of a toy, a child who's not easily distracted would crawl back to the staircase again to try to crawl up, and they'll do it consistently. So where do they lie and where do you lie? So children who are highly distractible, Do not criticize children when they get distracted easily. The child can't help it too. So, firstly, you can start off by removing distractions in the home environment within good reason. And then the child is doing some activity. This helps them in persistence. So, over time, when they take pleasure in their own completion of a task, and that becomes the priority, even if they get distracted, they will get back to the task at hand much quicker. And this requires a little help from the environment too to protect the child's concentration until the child is around 6 years of age. And low distractibility, this may be a problem in infancy because they don't get distracted when they fall down, as I said, or you want them to not do something and put them somewhere else. They don't get distracted. It may seem like a problem initially, but it's a huge quality to have as they grow up. And the last one we'll talk about is sensory threshold. This is the awareness of the child to any outside stimulus. So, how much stimulus does the child require to show a reaction? So, these stimuli can be sound, light, smell, sight, flavor, texture, temperature. Some children can't wear anything but cotton, and even the tags on their clothes bother them. And a slight difference in a regular recipe that you've made, they know, in an instant, they know that something's off. Um, the dad has had a haircut and they immediately recognize it. You've changed your light bulb from white to warm white, and they know a difference and get bothered by it, and they show a reaction. Um, some children, my son is highly sensitive. He's on the other, really at the end of the spectrum, and I feel like he knows what's going on in my brain. So that's how sensitive children can be to stimuli. So where does your child fall and where do you fall? So how do we deal with children who have a low sensory threshold? So these children, that means they don't need too much stimulus to show a reaction. These children might seem finicky or fussy, but we should never label them as such. They are just acutely aware of their environment and expressing themselves. This is an asset, and we can help them deal with any discomfort that this may cause. So we can avoid crowded spaces and introduce them. So these children don't want to touch anything wet or anything gooey. So introduce them to different textures and other sensory inputs that the child doesn't like, and gradually introduce it, but do it consistently. Because if you keep things away from the child, saying, oh, my child does not like to touch anything gooey, and you never give your child that experience, the child can never get over it. Do always make an effort to give different textures and different things to your child so they experience it little by little and they get comfortable with it. Children who have a high sensory threshold, that means, which means that they need a lot of input to get any reaction. These children are seeking more input. So they like to touch things, they like to poke it, they like to bang it and see what sounds they make. So give them opportunities by giving them different textures, name all the sounds you hear while you're walking, give them different, experiences of smells in the kitchen, allow them to make music with pots and pans. You can offer toys with brighter colors. So you're catering to their need for this uh, stimulation. So when you honor a child's temperament, you nurture their soul. Parenting isn't about shaping a child, but embracing who they already are. Because it's very important for us to accept our child and not judge our child for their temperament. And I told you to mark your temperament and your child's temperament because most often we find that when there's a gap between both our temperaments, we find that trait very challenging to deal with. So, this exercise was for you to understand your child better and to understand yourself better and to see why you're finding certain traits difficult to deal with, because we all have triggers. And if we give it a thought about why we're getting triggered, and most often than not, it's because of this difference in our temperaments. So I hope that I have thrown some light into understanding your child better. And I'm open to any questions now.
Feel free
Am I
to,
still sharing?
I believe
Am I
so.
still sharing this?
Is everyone seeing? Yep.
Oh, I want.
Feel free to
Yes.
unmute yourself or drop any questions in the chat. And you can also privately message me questions if you want me to read them out anonymously. That's fine as well. We can very, very barely hear you.
You hear me now?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. So, hi, good morning. I have a 4-year-old. I mean, he's going to turn 4 next year. Uh, like when you spoke about distractibility, I want to understand where my son lies. So when he was 2, he would focus on stacking cups. And at the same time, he would hear a concrete mixer that's like driving like way beyond
Right.
like my hearing capacity. So where does that
So that's more sensory threshold. So these children who are very sensitive, they get inputs from with all their senses and they hear things and look at things that we don't. But is the child being distracted from pursuing that activity that your child was doing? So if he was playing with blocks, did he stop playing with the blocks to run to see the concrete mixer?
no, he did.
Or did he just hear about it, tell you, and continue to do the blocks? Then he's not distractible.
Right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Any other questions from parents here tonight? You can also, like I said, message me anonymously if you want a question read out.
I have one question. I don't know if this is how to say this, but how do you deal with moments where you feel like your personal temperament and, or what advice would you have for moments when you feel like your personal temperament and your child's temperament are really clashing? You know, there's a sense of like being sensitive to if your child is has really intense reactions, for example, or intense moments
Yeah.
as is normal, but that in and of itself can feel really like just overwhelming. Like I find myself actually using lately like earplugs, not that I can't hear my children, but like but just sometimes the noise is like I'm recognizing like it actually elevates my own sense of overwhelm, and just a slight dampening can help my personal temperament. Is that, I don't know if you have any
Yeah.
advice for that.
Yeah, I
Or if I'm
totally
alone in that.
understand you. No, not at all.
Okay.
Because intense children, every parent finds it overwhelming to parent intense children. Um, but yes, I mean, there's no easy way out to
Yeah.
parent intense children because I have an intense child too. So it does because it's constant work, right? It's constantly you trying to be in control of your own emotions, your own reactions,
Oh,
and
so
always trying
true.
to
Yeah.
respond. So it's a constant work and it does get extremely overwhelming with our work and with taking care of the house and taking care of the child.
Yeah.
It is really difficult to do this all the time. But I always say it's parenting can never be completely perfect. You can't get it right 100% of the time. But that small step to get it right, I think is enough for the child. And I feel like if you've shown a certain reaction, because I do that sometimes too, that, you do get a little frustrated and say, oh God, why are you screaming so much? Don't do this. After the situation has settled, I always say, I'm sorry I reacted to that. I shouldn't have, but I did. And you see that when you do this repair, the child also understands why you reacted. And it really helps them get back to a sense of normalcy and
Yeah.
not judge themselves. Because when we react, the child judges himself or herself and
They
thinks that, oh,
internalize that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But it's not, but that shouldn't uh, you shouldn't think that, oh, I did it once and now I've just destroyed it for my child. No, it's not that at all. We do have moments like this. Every day you might have moments like this, but to do that repair will help
Mm-hmm.
your child.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. That's wonderful.
So,
Any other questions? I see a question here privately. I'll read it out. How can I balance the needs of children with different temperaments within the same household? So siblings that have very different temperaments.
so yes, I have seen it in my case also, that parenting style, I mean, it's not something conscious, but without you knowing, your parenting style will be different with both your children. I understand that there are some house rules that apply to both siblings, but when you're dealing with your children on a one-on-one basis, say one child expresses very easily and the other child doesn't, then you would automatically tend to go to the other child and ask more questions to this child who doesn't express easily about how they feel. It's not something that you need to do consciously. I think if you've been in tune with your child's emotions, it's something that happens very internally to parents, that their parenting styles are very different with both your children. And children, as they grow up, might question, why are you doing this to, my brother or sister, but you behave like that with me? I think as they grow up, they also understand their siblings' temperament and why you did that. Now it may seem like you're not being fair, and even if you explained, they might not understand. But as they grow up, they will understand when they are clued into their siblings' temperament.
We have another question here. Are there common patterns of the temperament traits that you tend to see commonly?
There are no. I mean, there's really a mix. It's a permutation, combination of all these things, and each of us has a different thing. But I see that some temperament traits are commonly difficult for parents to deal with. Like adaptability is one. Initial reaction, when there's high initial reaction, that's one of the most difficult temperament traits to deal with, because you cannot give a new experience to your child without you being there physically and spending a lot of time to allow your child to get used to this new experience. That's a very uh, uh, common one that parents find uh, difficult. And intensity of reactions. These three, I feel, are commonly uh, difficult for parents to deal with. And that's when parents normally feel overwhelmed.
Let's see if we have any more questions here. Um, what are some ways to encourage flexibility in children with more rigid temperaments?
Yeah, so like I said, it's not something that happens in a day or a month. It happens over years, and us constantly giving them that experience of having to adjust. And as they grow up, they understand that it helps them to adjust to new situations or to a change in routine, and it helps people around them. At a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old might not understand this. It's beyond their um, cognitive ability to understand how it helps the environment. But if you keep giving them experiences, then they slowly get used to adapting to the situation. Because many parents, I've seen that And when you ask a child to adapt to something new, this child shows a lot of emotions. And they may throw a tantrum or they may have a meltdown. And to avoid this meltdown, parents normally always try to change the environment to suit this child. And that's a big problem for the child as they grow up because they have not had any experience adapting to any change in their routine or being flexible. And it becomes really difficult to do that when they become adults or teens. So it's important to give them experiences, but in small doses, like I said, and to hold space for emotions when they have meltdowns. I mean, expect meltdowns when they have to do this, just hold space for it and be regulated when they have meltdowns. And over time, the child will learn.
We have another question here. How can parents with different temperaments themselves work together to create a consistent parenting approach?
That's one of the toughest things. Yeah, yes. It depends on how easy it is to approach your partner or the co-parent to talk about temperaments or to talk about your parenting style and why it's important for you, why it's important for the child. It really is more of how you deal with it as co-parents and how your relationship is. Um, but I always say that if it's impossible to, uh, you know, express your views and to convince your co-parent about your parenting style, I, let it go because beyond a point, this tussle causes more damage to the child than than the difference in parenting styles. So I think there's a point where you let it go and know that even a single parent being clued into the child and having that parenting style where you have no judgment attached and where you understand and hold space for the child's emotions, even one person in the child's life like this is enough for the child to give that scaffolding for a turn into a more emotionally regulated adult with a happier adult whose emotional well-being will be taken care of. Even one person like this in the child's life is enough. So just keep that in mind and let go after a point because this tussle is a problem for the child.
Um, Here we have a question. Do you have advice for when a child who is intense and highly emotional, and how to not only hold boundaries, but decide where they ought to be? I have a constant, pointless power struggle with my 4-year-old because I'm trying to hold a boundary and be consistent, but she is so intense that my boundary begins to feel useless in the first place.
Um, so when you say boundary, I mean, when you say intense, because there are different things in being intense, are they just loud and crying, or are they being physical or, hitting something or hurting someone else or hurting themselves? Because then you will have to physically hold them and say, I understand you're feeling really upset, but I'm having to hold you because you cannot express you being upset like this, and expressing yourself like this is not okay. It's hurting this person or it's hurting you. I'm just going to hug you or I'm going to hold you. I'm sorry until you calm down and then we can talk about it. So you might have to physically hold them back if it's a very physical reaction. If it is a loud reaction, it is very difficult for you to hold space for these emotions consistently because it's a very constant thing every day in your household. It might be difficult. Um, I'm sorry, but it is required of the parent to do this. And when you can't, I feel like if it's constant and just physically being there with the child, and if you can just tune out of the uh, audio levels. I feel over time parents kind of get used to that with intense children. But there is really no easy way out with intense children. It is difficult. If you have a co-parent who can handle the load with you, it really helps. Where, you take turns with dealing with these intense emotions.
Thank you. I think that's it for questions. You're getting a couple thank yous. Dolores says, thank you for waking up early in India and volunteering your time to give such an insightful presentation. Yeah, thank you so much, Hindola, for sharing your early morning with us and sharing your wisdom. This recording, as I mentioned, will be available tomorrow. So I'll send it out to the schools that are participating in the parenting series. So reach out to your school, or you can reach out to myself directly or Hindola here. I will drop my email here. If you have any questions about our parenting series, feel free to reach out to me. Next week, we have another international person joining us from Australia. She's sharing her morning with us. Ashley Obst. She's going to be talking about parenting with a purpose and integrating Montessori into your family's routine. So we look forward to seeing you back for that. And again, thank you so much, Hindola, and thank you to all the parents who decided to take an hour out of their day to come and learn some new strategies. Hopefully this was a helpful discussion for you all. Enjoy the rest of your evening and the rest of your day, Hindola.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Take care, everyone.